Then I will do a brief introduction to Connected Innovators and what we are looking for. Ruth will do an overview of creative informatics and other funding opportunities. Should you perhaps, go through this discovery workshop and decide that this is not really for you, there are other funding opportunities available from creative informatics. Then we'll have 10 minutes for Q&A. No pressure. If there aren't any questions, we'll just have a quick 5-minute comfort break so you can get up, stretch your legs, get water, whatever you need to do. Then we'll have a presentation by Nicola about research and development. This is a big part of the application. It requires 500 words. So Nicola is going to talk about how to approach that in your application. So that'll be really useful when justifying the R&D aspect of your project. And then Susan will talk about what data looks like and how to evaluate your impact, as data can be quite an intimidating word, but she will talk about how data can be presented and how data looks differently in different ways. Then we'll have, again, another Q&A. This will also be the opportunity to just voice your opinions or your concerns. I see that we do have one of our innovators in the room today, Madeline. I'm glad to see Madeline. And if you have any questions for Madeline, she's part of the current cohort. This is your opportunity to ask those burning questions. So yeah, any feedback, concerns, questions, please take this opportunity to ask. And then we'll be wrapping up, final thoughts, and then close. So that is the structure of this event. Of course, if there are no questions or conversation, we may end early. So it's not a strict schedule. Right. So with all of that being said, let's begin. I'm going to hand over to our Executive Director, Ola, and she is going to just do a brief intro to Creative Edinburgh.
Thank you very much, Inga, and welcome everyone to our Discovery workshop. My name is Ola Wojtkiewicz. I'm Executive Director here at Creative Edinburgh, and we thought it would be useful to give you a very brief overview of what we do and why, to touch a little bit on our vision, mission and values, to consider our new strategy for the next 5 years, also reflect on our collaboration with Creative Informatics, and finally to share some thoughts on what Connected Innovators project means to us in the context of our membership. So starting with what we do and why. Creative Edinburgh is the biggest creative industry membership organization in Scotland. We currently have 5,200 members. And what we do in a nutshell is we try to help freelancers to thrive in the context of Edinburgh and wider Scotland. And we do that through offering various events, training opportunities. We provide opportunities for networking. We're famous for our mentoring service, but also are always ready to offer one-on-one consultations to our members. We also really wish to raise the profile of creative industries across Edinburgh and beyond. And so that's part of our extensive advocacy efforts. So we talk to the government, we talk to the local authority, we talk to Creative Scotland and various other agencies to advocate for creative freelancers and their needs and wants, to make sure that they are being met. And we are, quite importantly, part of a bigger network of creative organizations in Scotland and also internationally. So we work collaboratively with Creative Stirling and Dundee and Aberdeen and Glasgow, and this is really important to ensure that we don't operate in isolation and that we share our work and findings with colleagues across the country. In terms of our vision, mission, and values, we have just refreshed that piece of work, and so that's why we're excited to share it. And I was, in preparation for today's workshop, I was just reminding myself that all that we do at Creative Edinburgh is informed by our vision, mission, and values. And our vision, very simply, is that we want Edinburgh to be a city that attracts creative people to contribute to its success, and where they feel included, connected, inspired, and supported regardless of their background. And I think that's quite fitting in the context of today's workshop and specifically Connected Innovators project. And our values, just to remind everyone, again, very much aligned with what our colleagues at Creative Informatics believe in, are inclusive, collaborative, curious, sustainable, and connected. And I think those are the threads which weave through everything that we do and want to do in the future. In terms of our strategy for the next 5 years, I just wanted to acknowledge that we have seen an enormous change happening over the last 2 years in the creative industries and everywhere else. And so we have listened to many calls to reevaluate re-establish ways of working. And we have been reflecting on the future of Creative Edinburgh's work and thinking very carefully about who we are here to serve and also how we can do it better. And so this is really just an opportunity for me to say that we are always keen to hear from you. So if there's something which Creative Edinburgh should be doing or could be doing and we haven't thought of that, please do tell us your views. Now, in terms of collaboration with Creative Informatics, I must say that this is one of our most exciting partnerships, which has been taking place for the last 2 years. We are now 2 years. We're now in the final year of this collaboration. It is a very ambitious research and development program, which brings essentially world-class creative industries and tech sector together. And my colleagues will tell you more about it, but I just wanted to reflect on the fact that where it converges quite beautifully with Creative Edinburgh work is in nurturing local talent through five funding programs and associated support. So it means a lot to us, and we are very grateful for this collaboration opportunity. And finally, just some thoughts on Connected Innovators in the context of Creative Edinburgh membership. So Connected Innovators is one of those 5 funding programs, and Inga will tell you more about it shortly. But I just wanted to say that it aligns brilliantly with Creative Edinburgh's ambitions and our efforts to build new membership and also to make our offering varied, exciting, and relevant. So we are so excited to have you here with us in the room, 28 people. Very glad to see you all. And we can't wait to answer your questions, to offer support and guidance. And I hope you enjoy today's workshop. And I'm going to button to Inga now. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Ola. So, what is Connected Innovators? Well, Connected Innovators is first of all, I just want to say it's such an exciting opportunity, and I feel very lucky to be working on this with the current cohort, also with the Creative Informatics team. So Connected Innovators is an opportunity for creative people with an idea, a practice, or a business or approach to apply for funding. What it really does, it gives you funded time to work on research and development and professional development. And I think that's such an important thing, because as creatives, sometimes we don't have time to really reflect on what our creative practice needs. And that's why Connected Innovators is so great, because you are being paid for your time to develop what you're working on. So you can apply for up to £10,000 in funding, and this funding really allows you the potential to grow. As Ola mentioned, Connected Innovators is a funded opportunity by Creative Informatics, and the team at Creative Edinburgh delivers this program. So if you need any support, you can come to Creative Edinburgh. And if you're successful in your application, you'll be seeing more of me at the Connected Innovators meetups and workshops, etc. So, oh, sorry, I can't even see what it says at the top of my screen. But what does potential growth in your practice look like? So the first thing is supporting your creative community. And you can support your creative community through your work, and you can develop work that supports the community. Potential growth could look in terms of self-development. So you can self-develop by gaining new skills, insights, and experiences for personal growth. You can explore innovative ways of doing things, whether that be exploring collaboration with other creatives, whether that be reflecting on ways to solve problems, and also importantly, really reflecting on ways to make money from your practice. Potential growth can also mean scaling your business, so growing your business, engaging with new markets, perhaps even expanding your team. Perhaps you are someone that is working alone as an individual, but this could allow you the opportunity to expand your team and find other people to work with you. So that's quite an important aspect of this, is scaling your business. And then also experimentation towards creating a new thing, whether that new thing is an object, a digital object, a product, or a service. So developing your practice and really honing on those skills is what the potential growth can look like within this program. So your work could explore one of the 4 key areas. So when you are applying for this program, think about how your work speaks to one of the 4 key areas. One of the 4 key areas is developing new modalities of experience. So a particular way of doing or experience something. Perhaps it's exploring new business models for creative industries. Perhaps you're looking at the creative industries and you see a gap that you wish to fill, or you see something that you wish to improve on. So you can explore new business models in the creative industries. Developing access and engagement with new audiences. So that can mean putting work on for audiences. It could mean collaborating with the public, or simply exploring new customers for your business. And lastly, unlocking the value of archives and data sets. So discovering hidden information that informs your practice. And we can certainly help you with identifying data sets. If that seems a bit big, just come to us and we can definitely help you with that. So who is eligible for this amazing program, you may ask? People who are interested in making an impact in the community. So creatives who are interested in really making a change in the community. Established members of the creative industry who are keen to demonstrate leadership. Now, established members, it doesn't mean that you have to be a well-known person in the creative industry or have a big following on social media. It just means that you're engaging with the creative community and you've really thought about ways in which you can establish yourself if you are already not established. Of course, you need to be willing to propose and ready to propose a research and development project. And my colleague Nicola will talk about that later, as that is a big part of this application. As Madeline, one of our current cohorts, will share with you too, is that you need to be willing to talk about and share your work with the creative community. So that is obviously a must. You need to be ready to present your work at any given time and just be willing to share that with the community, because it is about creating impact and in a way uplifting other creatives in the community. Also, quite importantly, you need to be based in Edinburgh or Southeast Scotland, or your work has to have an impact on the creative community or industry. If you're not sure about this, please do ask. With all of that being said, all of this should be data-driven. Everything that you are doing within the Connected Innovators project will be data-driven. And again, my colleague Susan will talk about what data looks like and the impact that it can have on your practice. So what do you get in return? So you'll get financial support, as I mentioned earlier. There is up to £10,000 available. You also have facilitated peer support to complete your research and development projects. So once a month, we have meetups with the other innovators, and it's a really great opportunity to support each other and to be a sounding board. Of course, you'll get professional development around data-driven innovation. And one of the amazing things about this is that it introduces you to such a huge network of people within the creative industry. So going forward, you will have so many more contacts, and that's obviously a plus in the creative industry. I would really encourage you to read up on the diverse projects of the current cohort, which really illustrates how their practice is growing in data-driven ways. After this workshop, you will be sent a link to resources, so you can read up on the current projects, as well as recordings from previous presentations. So these projects are absolutely amazing, and I would really encourage you to just engage with what's currently happening with Connected Innovators. Right, I'm going to move over to Ruth Oliver.
Morning, everyone. Just give me 1 second to share my screen. It's really lovely to see some familiar faces in the audience today as well. So I'm going to keep this really quick. For those of you who are new to CI, Creative Informatics is a collaboration between the University of Edinburgh, where myself and the rest of the delivery team work, Edinburgh Napier University, Codebase, and of course, Creative Edinburgh as well. We're funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council with some other money from the City Deal and Scottish Funding Council, with the goal of promoting data-driven innovation in the creative industries in and around Edinburgh. And as you said earlier, this covers as well as Edinburgh City and the wider Southeast region. And all of our funding programs support people to use data to drive groundbreaking new products, businesses, and experiences in these sectors. So I thought what would be most useful for me to do in this slot today was just give you a very quick overview of the different programs that we have alongside Connected Innovators, and let you know which one of those are also open for application at the moment or will be opening again. So first up, we've got Creative Bridge, which is run in collaboration with Codebase, and it's really a pre-accelerator for people with early stage business ideas who want to learn more about startup thinking and tech development. It will be reopening this summer for the final round of applications. So please do keep an eye out for promotion for that round coming up. Then we also have our Resident Entrepreneur Programme. So this offers £12,000 of funding for people looking to develop data-driven businesses in the creative industries. Funding call for resident entrepreneurs is currently open, and it'll shut on the 20th of April. And it's our penultimate call. So I'll be running one more of those calls later this summer. And I'm the main point of contact for resident entrepreneur funding applications. And there's a couple of people who've been funded by the Strand in the room today as well, which is lovely. But very happy to have a conversation with anyone who would like to find out more. We also run lots of events in the form of labs and studios, which are a way for people really to get exposure to new technology and ideas in the creative industries. We've got one tomorrow night at the fruit market, where one of our resident entrepreneurs, Ted Cotterwass, is demonstrating his new project. So please do have a look and come along if you're free to learn a bit more about what we've been up to. And then we also have our challenge projects, which are a way for us to match larger creative and cultural organizations with data-led challenges with people from the creative community that can help solve those. So we've just recruited our last round of challenge holders for the program, and we will be recruiting for people to answer their challenges from mid-May onwards. And the way that works is there's up to £20,000 of funding available for people that can design a creative, technical, data-driven solution to their challenge. So again, please do keep an eye out for those coming up and being advertised. It would be lovely to get some of you to apply for those as well. But if you do have any questions about the wider CI program, you're very welcome to get in touch with myself, and I'm very happy to try and answer those for you. I will stop sharing my screen now and pass back over to Inga.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Ruth. I'm going to open the floor to any questions. And if you want to also drop a question on the chat, please do so. So anyone for questions so far about the program or anything at all?
Hi, Inga. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm Pooja from Sun City. I was wondering how long could these research projects be for Connected Innovators?
The project runs up to 6 months.
Okay.
Yes.
So it could be anything up till 6 months.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries.
I have a question.
Hi, Derek.
Sorry, Derek, go ahead.
No, I was just wondering about protection of your idea within the program.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I was just wondering about the protection of your idea and your IP within the program.
Okay. Yeah, Nicola.
It stays yours. The model we have for all our funding programs is that you retain your IP. We want you to do well commercially. That's, the whole idea is that we support you to get there rather than us taking any claim on it.
Okay, thanks.
I need to unmute myself. Who was the other person I couldn't see on my screen?
I think that might have been me.
Oh, hi, Angus.
I've got a very naive question. What does it mean, data-driven?
We are going to have a presentation on that shortly, which is really going to unpack what data-driven innovation means.
But can you tell me quickly?
So data-driven innovation is using information that's all around you to inform your practice. So whether, for example, if you're a qualitative researcher and you want to go out there and gain information about people, you can use that to inform your practice. And that information that informs your practice is data-driven innovation.
So what's an example of a data-driven project that's an actual project?
Could I
still can't really understand.
Okay. Madeline, I'm going to hand it over to Madeline.
This might be quite off the wall compared to what a lot of people think of as data-driven, but I actually use algorithms to design knitting patterns, and I've been funded to develop some new ones by the Connected Innovators project. But I know that some of the cohort that I'm with are also doing things like developing systems for connecting artists and scientists who want to work together, and so that's a quite different project, and it's a very, very broad range of applications that you can put, and the definition of data is also very broad, so it's your imagination that brings it all together. But yeah, data is everywhere, and if you can bring it into your practice, then that's data driven. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Madeline. Does that answer your question, Angus?
Not really, no. I mean, what is data? It's like if I paint a picture, I'm using data. I'm using visual data. Does it have to be digital data? Does it have to be,
No, part of my project is unlocking the archives, data in archives. And so yesterday I was at the National Museum of Scotland collecting information about traditional Fair Isle knitting to inform my project and add to data as well. So yeah, it doesn't have to be digital. Or, I mean, the museum haven't digitized their collection of Fair Isle knitting, so I have to go and look at the original specimens. But I suppose it's data when it's just raw and out there, and it becomes information when you apply a process to it. That would be my distinction. I mean, a phone book is data. Old-fashioned telephone directories, they were data. It is a very difficult distinction to make. I guess having a lot of experts around and sticking with this morning's session, you'll maybe get a bigger picture of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Susan is going to do a presentation really delving deep into what data means. And I really appreciate that question because it is a big word, but it's something that's constantly around us. And once you tap into that, it will be certainly comprehensible. So, okay, we're just going to have a quick 5-minute comfort break. So I will see everyone at 6 minutes past 11, and we'll move on. Move on to the other presentations. So see you in 5. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone had a good comfort break. So we're going to move on to the presentation by Nicola Osborne, who's the program manager for Creative Informatics. And Nicola is going to talk about research and development and how to approach this in your application. Nicola, are you here?
I'm here. Sorry, I switched off the break and totally forgot I'd left it off. That's fine. I will show my screen. I've got a couple of slides. They're more just as an aid memoir, I guess. I'm quite happy to have questions more than presenting, to be honest. So, yeah, essentially, I'll just give you a sense of what R&D can mean in this kind of context, I think. So, I will just share my screen with you. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, super. So essentially, research and development is about doing something new, novel, uncertain. I mean, R&D generally means there's a risk. I haven't pulled in the official UK tax definition of it because it's about 17 pages long, but essentially it's about kind of risk taking and doing something new. And especially for Connected Innovators, we're expecting it to be very exploratory. So we'd want you to have a goal in mind, but it's very much more about that journey of what you learn and what you develop in the process, in the hope that it moves you towards something new for you, something new for your creative business. That might be that it's something that's very kind of product orientated, but it might be about learning for the sector. It might be about investigating something that will allow you to build the next product, even if you haven't done it in the course of the project, if you see what I mean. And it might be really technical, or it might be much more about developing your idea. So as long as it is data driven, and we have talked about that a bit, and we'll talk about it a bit more in a wee bit, then it's going to look really different for different projects. And we've had some really different looking ones. I thought it might be useful to see our criteria. So on the website and in the application process, there is specific criteria to kind of meet. And the sort of R&D criteria we have there specifies that you need to propose an R&D project that will enable you to experiment and explore an idea that could have a genuine impact on a creative business or creative practice. So I'll let you read the whole rest of that if you'd so like, but it's a part of what you went through at the outset there. It could be any number of things. I'm quite happy to answer questions, particularly on the sort of technical end of things. I tend to answer questions around kind of data and tech when running these kinds of workshops, but it doesn't necessarily mean your project has to be just that. It can be research, it can be things. And the questions that we ask you to respond to tell us about why it is R&D, why it is innovative. So primary question for it is question 14 on the application form, which is saying that we're funding research and development in data and data-driven innovation. Describe how you're using data and or data-driven technologies in this project. It's a really important question. even with our very broad and inclusive definition of data, it's just about us understanding what that means in the context of your project and you making that case. And in question 12, where we ask you, please outline what is innovative about the idea. How is it new, novel, pioneering, or significantly different to any existing understanding or approach to the way you work within your creative practice? If you've got both of those things going on, if you're using data, if you're doing something new, and you've kind of made that really clear, then that helps us understand that it is an R&D project. It is something that is going to fit the criteria for this call. I did want to say a bit about like the how you do R&D though. I think some people assume that they have to do absolutely everything themselves. It might be that you want to undertake all of the details, research and development yourself. Certainly from a skills point of view, that can be really useful. We've had a lot of Connected Innovators recently learning Python for various different projects. You've had people who are somewhat experienced in doing coding themselves who built stuff with that. But that doesn't have to be how it works. So you can also be collaborating with technical partners or have contractors or experts that you're learning from or learning with. We had one Connected Innovator in the first round who essentially her budget reflected having several different expert days with different technical data-driven type performers. So Sarah Kelmus, she's a nice little video about her project. I'll put it in the chat later. So I know she spent sort of, a day looking at how to do some of the sort of data visualizations, interactive visuals that she wanted to do. She spent a day with someone who is used to using kind of very technical kit for producing kind of new pieces of music. Like that is also a really valid way to learn things by working. Oh, someone's kid is heckling. Good job. My kid is always heckling my calls as well. So it's very much about you developing your skills and understanding. There are different ways to do that. And it might be doing it directly. It might be working with people who are more expert than you to understand who to call on to do that, how to articulate your needs to someone who is more technical to do work with you in the future. We don't expect everyone to come out of this having done everything themselves and knowing that they have to be able to do everything themselves in the future. It's very much about taking your skills forward so that you can do new stuff. And that might be as a collaborator, it might be as the person building themselves. All of those things are valid. It's not just sort of sitting down to build a new product or code a new thing. And on that note, I know it's already been mentioned, but yeah, R&D can look like more classical research stuff. So it might be analysing the kind of the market or analysing the sector. So we've had a couple of projects in that kind of space where it's much more a data analysis project. Brian Baglow would be one of those. He looked at the game sector in Scotland because there was a real lack of data on the computer game sector. And that data has helped him then make a case to go off and get further funding to do more to support the sector. Cara Overy was doing a lot of work analysing carbon impact in the kind of craft and creative sector. And so different kind of data analysis towards creating a new tool and product. She's actually been successful in applying for resident entrepreneur funding to take that forward as a new product. But yeah, R&D might also be, a technical experimentation or coding kind of piece. So we've had Anna Bettencourt from Black Goblin, who's been looking at how to use new AI techniques and things in the development of products that she's already working on, but to kind of really upskill herself so she knows how to bring in new features and new cutting edge features that will help keep her competitive in the future as a creative and as a business person. But we've also had Michael Begg, who's created very experimental, amazing, turning data into music software for himself, which he's gone on to use in a project funded to a company, COP26 is a premiere of it at the Queen's Hall in June, called Light Water is Black Water. But that was very much a kind of a coding something, but not as someone who's an expert coder, but sort of learning and doing and trying it out as he went. And yeah, it might be about creating a new product or resource. Because we have different funding strands, sometimes things fit more into a resident entrepreneur bucket, and sometimes they're more Connected Innovator one. And when it's more exploratory, even when it's a product-y type thing, then it tends to fit into Connected Innovators. So people who've done this sort of thing included Chris Dukes, who was creating a sort of accessible platform to help people sort of spark creativity, particularly people who were at home, which turned out to be a very prescient thing to be doing in the last couple of years. And we have Jonathan Elders, who's creating a resource rather than a thing to help creatives work with the sort of science and science communication sector, and very much driven by sort of the data around kind of audience engagement and experience of doing that. So I realize it's a bit of a fluffy thing. I should put some more pictures in. I love a picture. But I want to give you a bit of an overview of what R&D can look like in a Connected Innovator project. You'll note that I have not put in a sort of this is exactly what it must look like kind of slide, because as with a number of our different funding strands, you define the project that you're going to do. So what R&D means for your project will vary a bit, but that's part of the reason for having a workshop like today, so that you can ask questions about it. If useful, you can have follow-ups and things to sort of talk it through. But I think if there are any questions, I know Susan's going to follow me in a second and talk a bit more about the data and data-driven aspects, which obviously link in a lot to the R&D side of things. But if you are looking with kind of questions about how you budget stuff around the R&D, how you plan parts of the R&D, we're quite happy to have those kinds of questions as well. I'm aware of the fact that R&D is a thing that is maybe not as comfortable a term for some creative practitioners as it is for others. I'm aware that developing a new play is R&D in a theatre business. Typically, we'd be looking for something that is much more clearly data-driven and usually something that has a digital aspect to it, but that doesn't mean the output has to be digital, as Madeline very, very nicely demonstrated earlier, that actually the output of a data-driven project doesn't necessarily have to be a digital thing or a digital product or a digital output. But I think there are some, there are things that are R&D that wouldn't be appropriate as a fit for this, but a lot of sort of new research and development that you might be doing with data should fit into this sort of strand, and we're quite happy to answer any of those questions. So with that, does anyone have any questions for me? I can see a lot of cameras off, so it's hard to see if anyone is looking baffled or delighted or confused. So I'm going to rely on you to wave a hand or pop a note in the chat if you've got anything you particularly like clarified or discussed a bit more. We always try and keep things quite general, these kinds of workshops, but obviously we can dig in further based on the questions that you guys have, because there are so many different kinds of creatives here. So questions are coming through in the chat. Is there a need for an economic return of the project? No. We'd like to think that you have a plan in terms of it being a productive future for your creative practice. So hopefully there is an economic return for you at the end of it in some way. And very much the intention of the whole of the Creative Informatics programme is to make sure the creative sector benefits from all the things that are going on in the in terms of opportunities around kind of new technologies and future-proofing skills and things. But it's R&D. R&D is risky. We don't expect everything to be successful, and that's okay. We don't expect everything to end up in a really shiny product of any kind. That's okay. And so, no, there isn't any kind of criteria that you have to have an economic return, but there are some questions that will be encouraging you to talk about why this would be beneficial for you. And so that might be economic. It might be about other things in terms of who you can work with. It might be about opening doors in other ways. So as long as you can articulate why this has a beneficial impact, that's great. It might be about improving, the environmental practice of what you do. I know we've had some activities in the past who've how they source the materials that they work with has been a part of the project they're doing. So yeah, it doesn't have to be economic return. We are hoping people think about themselves as creatives, also as people who are running a creative business, but it doesn't mean that you have to have a guaranteed economic return. Could you give an example of how a past project developed through the scheme? Like through just Connected Innovators, Harriet, or through kind of other bits of Creative Informatics? I have examples of both.
Yeah, through Creative Innovators would be great, but also just in general. But yeah, Creative Innovators in particular.
Yeah, so I think I do think sort of as a which one I go for? I'm gonna give me 1 second. I'm gonna put like a visual aid on my own screen to work out which would be the best one to kind of show that kind of trajectory. I mean, I do like Michael Begg's work that he did with the turning data into sound has been a really interesting one because it's led to other opportunities, and it's not a direct like immediate economic impact, but it's totally kind of changing how his practice as a composer is going. So it's quite interesting from that kind of point of view. But I think she's been in the first round probably, which is one that had the longest impact. Actually, Applied Art Scotland was a really interesting project. So they wanted to purchase some kit essentially to encourage people to try out VR. So they're an organisation that supports creatives and makers, and so they purchased a bunch of VR kits that were sent out as a part of the Distance project, which they set up for this, and allowed people to experiment with it. So rather than doing the experimentation themselves, they actually facilitated about, I think it was about 9 creatives to experiment with a new technology. And because it was working quite productively, they were also able to get a further funding from Creative Scotland to extend that to a second round. So there's been a huge number of people who we've then subsequently seen doing interesting work and trying out new VR and AR work purely because they got to play with the kit as part of that project. And so it's had a really interesting sort of longer run at things. And my colleague Ruth has just sent me a little private message to remind me of a really lovely one we've just had as well, which is, Kate Steenhow is one of our last round Connected Innovators. And she has been doing a project called Painting with Music. She does these amazing ink paintings using automatic pens, which totally can have a conversation with you about offline sometime if anyone's excited by those. And she does these beautiful drawings, but she works with computer science academics who are using machine vision to look at the paintings as they're emerging and turn the paintings into music. So you have this live, real-time experience where you see projected onto a big screen the paintings that she is doing, and that is turned into a soundscape that is generated by the actual painting process. And she worked with someone who we've worked with in other parts of Creative Informatics to develop this custom bespoke kit. So her budget included some time for her experts, some time for her, and for this bespoke kit, which is a sort of modified massage table that has a kind of camera above it that is connected up to both the computing, but also to project it on a screen. Has a huge roll of paper kind of built into it so she can do the drawings, and has all kind of kit she needs. It's a very, it's a wild project. Question in the chat from Ryan: can you give some details about how the funding will be given? Time might be helpful. Yeah, so funding comes in, I think, 3 blocks. Correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues in the chat. So you'll get some money at the outset to get things started, alongside all kind of kick-off paperwork. And then a sort of midway report is due, and once that's signed off, you'll get your second instalment, and then your third instalment comes after you've had your final report signed off as well. The reports aren't super onerous, but they just ask questions about how you spend the money, what progress has been made, what kind of impact you've had, have you been engaging people, because obviously that's a really important part about the connected part of Connected Innovators. So it just asks fairly straightforward questions. We'll tell you the formats for those right at the outset. But they're mirroring some of the kind of questions you'll get on the application form as well. So if you're able to fill in the application form, you'll be able to fill in the reports, no problem. And any other questions in chat? No, if there are any other questions later on, I'm around anyway, but I will shut up now because I've probably taken longer than my slot. So other questions come in. Up to 10k, does this mean you would like to see a budget of how the money is spent? Yes, please, but broad headlines are fine. And if you want it to be under 10k, that's totally fine. Then we can fund more people. If you want it to be exactly 10k, that's also fine. That's classically what we get in. Either is fine. And yeah, we'll expect you to put in some kind of indication of the spend of it in the application, and we'll certainly ask you for that as well in the kind of kick-off paperwork. It's not super detailed. Yes, so in terms of like, you should cost in your own time, in case anyone doesn't ask that question. People sometimes forget to pay for themselves, and that's really important. And yes, in terms of the what we expect in terms of day rates, we expect it to be at least living wage, and we indeed use the Scottish Artists Union day rates as our kind of marker for this is a fair rate of pay. And if we think someone looks like it's, usually the challenge is people that are undercharging for themselves. It's very rarely that they're overcharging for themselves. So we will kind of give feedback if the pay levels don't look quite right, to sort of modify things accordingly. And as I said, important to cost your own time. Any other questions just now? Obviously there's more time for questions later on. Okay, it's all quiet, that's fine. I will hand back to you, Inga, to do the next baton passing.
Great, thanks so much, Nicola, for that. I'm going to move over to Susan, who's going to talk about the burning question of what data looks like and what impact it can have. So Susan, over to you.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to get my screen up. Can you just let me know if you can see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I've been asked today to talk about kind of two themes, and one is impact, and the other one is data. So basically in the presentation, I'll just quickly kind of break down what both of these things mean and kind of how you might think about them when you're preparing for your application for the Connected Innovators strand. And the first thing I'll talk about is impact. So why talk about impact? Within Creative Informatics, we really aim to fund projects that have the potential to make a broader impact on the in the creative community, and this is really reflected in the application. There's a couple of questions that will ask you how to reflect on impact in your work and how you use impact. What impact your work has. So here I just want to give you kind of a more specific definition of what we mean by impact. I think a good definition is sort of the effect or influence on society that your project will contribute to. And breaking it down a little bit further, impact can really take on many forms. So it can be social or economic or environmental, for example. And within Creative Informatics, we really encourage you to consider how your work fits into kind of all three of these dimensions. And as Nicola said, we're really interested as well in projects that go beyond just economic impact and have kind of a broader impact. So I'll kind of go through each of these three categories and give you kind of some ideas of how they might be demonstrated. So social impact might be, for example, contributing to new knowledge in your domain, or it could be about fostering new collaborations or reaching new audiences through your work. It might be about enabling a larger amount of people to engage in kind of a new creative process, or bringing attention to an important societal problem. For example, we've had kind of creative projects that have brought attention to, for example, particular health problems or LGBTQ plus issues. And it could also be about, for example, contributing to the kind of broader cultural landscape of the city as well. So that's just some examples of social impact. In terms of economic impact, this is kind of more about growth, and it might be about your project leading to kind of increased revenue or attracting increased funding as a result of this work. But I think one thing that's important to think about is that this economic impact can be specific to your business or your practice, but it can also relate to kind of your industry or your sector more broadly. So it might be that through your project, you're attracting kind of increased funding to the sector more broadly. And finally, environmental impact. This can be very much about the sort of material aspect. So it might be that in your work, you're working to reduce material waste or innovating the sort of production pipeline in a more energy efficient way. Or you might be innovating existing processes that kind of decrease how energy and emissions the energy and emissions of your sector. Or it might be that your project is very much about educating others about environmental impact through, for example, an artistic intervention. So I think all of these kind of three categories are very broad, and you can demonstrate them in many different ways. There is kind of a fuller presentation on impact that will be made available to you by Inga, and it also kind of details how you might think about measuring impact in your work and demonstrating it. So that'll be made available to you. You can watch it on Vimeo, and that presentation also kind of includes all these slides with some resources about creating impact goals and helping with planning impact measurements if you need them. So now I want to move on to the big question of understanding data. So as you know, by now the Creative Informatics program is kind of all about this idea of data-driven innovation and creating new things with data or using data to inform your work. So you'll be asked about this in your application. Oh, sorry, maybe that was a... this idea of data-driven innovation can be very abstract. So I kind of wanted to show you what it might actually mean for you in practice. And as Madeline said, data is kind of everywhere around us. And so one thing we've been doing within Creative Informatics is trying to document the really different types of data that the projects we funded so far are using. And I think what's been really wonderful is that people, our projects have really used such a huge range of data in their work, and I wanted to show you kind of this range, and kind of help you think through how different forms of data might relate to your work specifically, for the Connected Innovators program. So I'll just go kind of through a few categories of this figure. It might be a little bit overwhelming because there's so many categories in it, but I'll say that Inga will also provide this figure to you as a resource, so you can kind of refer to it in a bit more detail later on. But I kind of go through two categories at the time, zooming in. So just starting from the top, lots of projects we've funded have focused on doing something with data about people. So this might be about, for example, what people think. So you might be interested in getting feedback about something you're doing, whether it's a product or service, or a way of engaging with people, or maybe analyzing people's experience when they're using a tool or a platform, or for example, engaging with an exhibition. And you can kind of sort of think how this sort of feedback about experience might help you improve what you're doing. And there's also a whole category of projects thinking through who people are. So this, for example, might be about understanding your audiences, understanding the market, and thinking through your audience's needs. And this can be particularly useful, I think, when you're just coming up with new ideas for new products, new services, new exhibitions, and so on. When you want to understand whether there's kind of a need and a want for them, and just understand your audience a bit more broadly. So moving on to the next two themes, or did I? Actually, I didn't. Sorry, I didn't talk about data about creative artifacts and processes. So moving down to the second box, there's also kind of a whole theme of work on data that is about creative artifacts. So one thing here might be, for example, understanding the environmental impacts of the artifacts you produce or you use in your work. So yeah, moving on to the next two themes, data can also be about businesses or sectors. So we've had a variety of projects that actually have been mentioned before, that kind of aim to compile or understand data about a wider sector. So like the gaming sector, for example, or the performing arts sector. And this can be a really valuable way, for example, for making a case for attracting more funding for a sector, or helping others understand their sector. And we've also had a lot of projects kind of previously seeking to understand what the market is for their type of work, and what other things already exist that are similar. And in the second box, we kind of moved to data about venues and performances. So I think a great example of this is the National Theatre of Scotland, which worked kind of on understanding their own touring data over time, and using that data to kind of inform future show tours. Or we've also had projects working on sharing information about venues, like the information about the space and sound specifications of physical venues, and using that as a way to help people kind of plan their productions in the future. And then the last two, so you might consider spatial or physical data in your practice, and this might include data about things like light or movement or position, or even GPS or environmental data. And within this theme, we've had kind of projects as diverse as using motion tracking for film production, to using smart textiles and creating interactive installations. And finally, collections of creative work can also be data themselves. So you might be interested in, for example, using a collection of sound files or artworks, or even historical reconstructions to some way to create new artworks or products or services. So again, that was kind of a very rapid tour of the various forms of data that you might use in your creative practice. So I hope that figure kind of makes it a little bit more concrete on the various types of data that are available. And as you can see, that there's such a range. It can be very qualitative data, it can be very quantitative or numerical, and we're really open to kind of various projects that use data in various aspects of the work. So and I would finally say just that the community page, which was posted in the chat already, on the Creative Informatics website, is a really great resource if you want to kind of see concrete examples of these forms of data, because that's kind of where these forms of data are sourced from our community. So yeah, I'll end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was really informative and really enjoyed listening to that presentation. I will open the floor to any questions around data and what that means. Are there any questions on the chat? No. Any questions at all about the presentation? No?
Yeah. Sorry, I just had a quick question. For the on the application form, what sort of questions about data will we be asked? So will it be specifically sort of what specific data do you want to source? Or I'm just wondering kind of how to prepare for that question.
Can I hand it over to you, Nicola?
Yeah, so one of the questions is one of the ones that I mentioned in my presentations. That's question 14, where we ask you to describe how you're using data and/or data-driven technologies. And I've literally put that question in front of me to make sure that I don't miss out any of the other questions you might have in that space. So if you give me 1 second, I'm literally doing a quick check of it to make sure I've not forgotten any other questions you're going to get in that direction. I think we'd really expect it to be, question 14 is the main question. We'd expect you to describe that though when you're describing your project, and we expect to see it sort of elsewhere in the thing. So there's one specific question that talks about data and data-driven innovation, but it's a main criteria, you know, in terms of things fitting. So expect you to talk about when you're describing the project, when you're describing what impact that work with data is going to have. So it's sort of implied to be sort of embedded across the piece, but there's also one specific question to make sure that you don't forget.
That's great, thank you. I suppose the reason I was asking is because I can think of the data which I want to gather. I suppose I'm just not sure at this stage but I have ideas of how to get it, but it still feels like, you know, I'm looking for like guidance around that. So is it okay to say that, like, this is where I'd start, but this is where I need help, or that sort of thing?
It's also okay to kind of follow up today with a one-to-one chat, just to kind of talk through that a bit as well, if that's helpful.
Great.
So yeah, either both are appropriate. Yes.
Great. Thanks very much.
Yes, I can see Angus has asked a question in the chat there, Inga, asking if the project they're working on will fit into the funding criteria. Is it appropriate to describe a specific project right now? I think if it's relatively brief, that would be just fine. I don't have any issue doing that. So, and/or can be picked up in one-to-one afterwards as well.
May I do that right now if I keep it short?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm an artist and an LGBT activist. I'm interested in, I suppose I am interested in data in the sense that I'm interested in measuring homophobia, the culture of homophobia in the city of Edinburgh at large. I've created exhibitions that have been closed down, that have run into the buffers in various kinds of ways. And what I would like to propose is to put some paintings that depict gay men into a storefront in Princes Street. Now, I have done some data on that, in that I started a petition which I tried to spread as widely as possible to see if there was support. So I know that, like, for example, 6,500 people viewed and read that petition, but only 130 people or so actually signed it and agreed. So, I mean, is that relevant data collection? And then if the project succeeded, I think it would be very interesting to gather further data, because I think it would have to be a data-driven project, because the best way to get responses, or to understand what responses would be to have a QR code that people can put on their phones and then leave, you know, somehow measure their responses through some interface that you set up through a QR code. So it's like, whether that's leaving messages or comments or views of films or all the other stuff that's involved in that kind of project. But, you know, that's a very activist project. It's on a very, I mean, to me, it's not controversial at all, but to some people it's extremely controversial. Is that appropriate? I mean, is that, you know, can I somehow model this project, which obviously it does have a, you know, sort of social ambition, to your funding guidelines? Is that the kind of thing that you'd look at, or is that like too hot a potato, or is it too vague, or you know?
I don't think it's too hot a potato. I would be really interested in that as well as a fellow queer creative person. I think you'd want to think about how you frame it. So I think the data you've gotten from the petition stuff, that's really interesting in terms of context for the application to understand what you've done already. I think in terms of what you would do with the data going forward, I think explicitly talking about what kind of data you're going to collect from the audience, what that's going to help you to learn what that would change in what you're doing in creative practice, or how you'd share that with whoever the stakeholders are you'd want to share that with. And I think it's an interesting question about who those would be, right? Whether that would be other artists or people who support LGBTQ plus artists and or LGBTQ plus communities, whether that's for people like the city who kind of license venues and exhibitions and things. Like I think that's probably an interesting question anyway, like who you'd want to have an impact on with this data. And I think also thinking how you might reuse the approach in the future. So it might be about sort of, are you wanting to do something similar again, or to take that to somewhere else just to show it, or are you wanting to kind of have that interactive mechanism be something that is useful in other kinds of art displays and activist work, which I could see it being quite interesting for. But I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be fittable within the scope, as long as it's really clear what the data aspect is and you've sort of framed it properly, that we can understand why that makes a difference. Because generally speaking, we're just trying to look at how can we make a difference? How can we take some more stuff forward? How can we help you move skills forward? How can we change your creative practice by doing something new? As long as you can kind of demonstrate that, I don't see any reason why that shouldn't fit. And certainly I would not consider, depends what your pictures are, but like I can't think of any reason why, if they are within the very, the basic obscenity laws safety net, if you see what I mean, then I don't see there being anything that we would find problematic in terms of controversy. And we have an equality, diversity, inclusion plan, which we collect data on all our participants, and are really keen to see work that does actually reach out for more diverse voices or enables more diverse work.
Thank you.
And then we have a question on the chat. If the proposal relies on data provided by another partner, do I need to present a data sharing agreement in the application?
I mean, bonus points if you can, but no, I don't think so. But I think you probably want to explain if there is a relationship with that data provider, because the reason we'd want to know about that is only to understand the risk. So if it relies on data from another partner and you don't have any way of knowing if you'll ever be able to access that data, we'd want to know what would happen in that situation. So do you have another set of data or a backup plan? But if you already have a relationship with that data provider, or the data is openly licensed, or something that gives some reassurance that you'll be able to use that data, that's fine. If you're planning to and need a data sharing agreement in the future, definitely write that in so that we understand that. But I think for us, it's about understanding how will this impact the feasibility of the project, and is there a risk that the project will flake because it's not your data? But there's precedent for all kinds of different levels of relationships with partner organisations with data. So I think as long as you can explain what the situation is and what you would do if you can't access that data, or that you can, then that's fine. Angus has asked about having one-to-one chat and when that might happen. I think if you drop an email, I'm going to let Inga officially give the appropriate email address to you, but either to Creative Informatics or to Creative Edinburgh, or to both of us, we can set that up. And I think if it is to talk through the kind of data aspects of it, I'm quite happy to pick that up personally. So if you just drop an email though to Inga and the Creative Edinburgh team, then they can point that in my direction as well.
Yes, we'll be sending out an email after this event with details about the one-to-one chats and also future drop-ins. We'll be having future drop-ins for the application. So if you have any questions, you can come to one of the drop-in sessions. There will be 2 drop-in sessions before the closing date on the 11th of May. Again, that will be sent out after this event. Great. Any other questions about the application or Creative Edinburgh, Creative Informatics? Any concerns, comments?
Sorry, I've got another question. There's an idea I wish to progress myself, but I'm also involved with a sort of charitable app that's been they're trying to get developed, would I be prevented from being involved with 2 applications?
Anna, would there be, or Ruth, would there be a conflict of interest with that?
No, there wouldn't be. They're completely separate things. It's something that I've been developing myself, but I've also been involved with helping them get things off the ground on a voluntary basis.
I don't think there's an issue there. Then I think that's okay. I think if they're sort of, coming as very separate applications, then they'll be judged on that basis. I think if it was 2 applications for you as an individual, it's not like we would ban you from applying to both, but we definitely wouldn't be funding by both.
Yeah.
But if one's an organisational one and one's a personal one and they're very different projects, I don't see any issue with that.
Yeah, they are completely different.
Then that should be fine.
All right, thanks.
Great question. Thank you, Derek. Does anybody else have any questions? Comments, concerns? No? Okay, well, we are 15 minutes early. So if nobody has any other questions, again, just keep an eye on your email. I will be sending a resource pack that Susan also mentioned. If you just want to reflect again on what data means, you can have a look at the slides, and I will be sending the slides from the presentations. Yeah, feel free to email info@Creative Edinburgh or me, Inga, at creative-edinburgh.com. Again, we will be having those drop-in sessions, but if you have any questions regarding the application or you just want to talk to someone on a sounding board, please do not hesitate to contact us. So if there is no other questions, thank you so much for coming to the Discovery Workshop. I really appreciate everyone's attendance and everyone's questions and comments. It's been absolutely lovely, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care.